He is a contributing editor to Gourmet. He writes for the New York Times. He writes a wonderfully engaging column for the AJC, which I hope you all read. And he has written books on subjects like the history of donuts, fried chicken, hamburgers, French fries. Is that a job or what is it? That's the academic side of John T. The other side of him is that the man really knows how to find good eats. And that's what Southern Belly, the ultimate food lover's companion to the South, is all about, finding good places to eat and talking about food in the South, because what this book is really is more of a social history. He writes about some fascinating characters in the South who are associated with food, people in Georgia, people in South Carolina. And John T., I want to talk to you a little about Maurice Bessinger, because I had some experiences with him. Those of you who know Piggy Park in Columbia, South Carolina, may have had some experiences with Maurice up and down. Anyway, it is a delightfully entertaining book. It is social history, cultural history, and it is delicious history. So please join me in welcoming the very wonderful John T. Edge.
Thank y'all very much, and thanks for the warm welcome, Bill. And I'll start with a caveat. Maurice Bessinger is in this book, but I'm not kind to him, for those of you who know him. He's got good barbecue. He doesn't have very good attitudes. This is very humbling and it's beautiful to look out at all these people and see so many friends I made when I was here in Atlanta, when I lived down on Sinclair, about a couple of blocks from the Yacht Club, about a couple blocks from Frank's bookstore, Acapella. It's great to be back here, and I look forward to the treats that the chefs and friends have assembled tonight. I have to take issue with one more thing that Bill said, that in terms of quantities of food, go easy. There are enough Kool-Aid pickles that Annie Quatrano prepared to feed all of you, I would imagine. And that's a reference point in the book. Pickles that have been steeped in Kool-Aid for about a week and somehow transformed from something sour to something phosphorescently sweet. There are deviled eggs that Jeff Moore made, and he had the good sense to not leave well enough alone and chopped up some bacon and put them on top, which suits me just fine. I hope it's bacon from Alan Benton up in Madisonville, Tennessee. Meredith Ford wrote a great piece about him and the AJC a couple weeks ago, and everything she said is true. If you can get your hands on his bacon, do. There is also the martini pickled Tom Olives of John Kessler. Is that a good way to describe them, John? Yeah, I mean, they sound like if you've been to one of these molecular cuisine restaurants and bitten into an orb of some sort that explodes in your mouth and been instructed before you bite into that orb to close your mouth so that the contents of the orb don't erupt and exit your mouth, then this is like that, with a martini, with the contents of a martini within, and they're great. There are also back there some tomato sandwiches that my buddy Angie Mosier, who is the vice president of the Southern Foodways Alliance, some of the tomatoes that you bite into and the red ripe juices trace their way down your arm and you know you're in the height of summer, those kinds of tomato sandwiches. They're coconut cupcakes that also come from an AJC story that Jim Alkmoody and Angie Mosier collaborated on, rediscovering the recipe behind Rich's coconut cake. And those cupcakes are based on that recipe, and they are back there somewhere as well. There is from Virginia Willis, who arrived as I was arriving. Virginia, there's spiced pecans. Is that what there is? Yes, says the voice in the back. Thank you for the spiced pecans. And I don't think I'm leaving out anything, but if I am, if somebody would please shout from the back and tell me. But thank y'all for the food, and thanks for the welcome back to Atlanta. I'm really happy to be here. What I try to do in this book, and what I try to do in my work with the Southern Foodways Alliance, is to repay kind of a debt of pleasure that I think that we as Southerners have earned over numerous generations. The idea being that for the longest time we had access to this wonderful food. We had access to, and still continue to have access to, just peerless fried chicken, fried in a cast iron skillet, burbling with lard. We had, pork shoulder, cooked till it was brown shading towards black, hacked into juicy bits, doused with a sauce of vinegar, maybe a little mustard cut into it, maybe a little bit of ketchup, maybe a little bit of hot pepper. We had access to this great food, but in a large part, we didn't recognize the people that cooked it. It was, you went to this old man's barbecue joint or that old woman's fried chicken joint, and we didn't pay enough attention, I don't think, and I'm including myself in this, certainly, to the people that cooked our food, to the woman who stood tall by the stove and stood by that stove from the moment she stepped to that stove when Eisenhower was in office and endures there today with George Bush in office. And endure she does. I care about those people, and I feel it a kind of trust that I'm given in writing about those people. And in this book, in Southern Belly, I want to give them their due. Originally, I wrote a version of this book in the late 90s and early aughts. And I did it for my friend Judy Long of Hill Street Press. Judy took what was, in my mind, just ramblings and exhortations and helped me see a way to find a book in that. And I thank her very much for that. This edition, which is just coming out now, corrects some of the mistakes I made. It doesn't correct all. I'm sure there are quite a few. But one of the things I did in the first edition was unnecessarily lopped off eastern Texas and northern Florida. And as I've traveled over the past decade or so, I've come to see very much the error of my ways as I travel through eastern Texas and northern Florida and see, just think about driving south from here, and as you head into the kind of loamy soil of South Georgia, if you don't see the sign at the border, you don't know where Georgia ends and Florida begins. It all kind of fuses, it kind of oozes out as you head towards the coast. You pick up by the time you're in South Georgia, northern Florida, you're in the land of mullet. And with the way that catfish has kind of swum upstream and become no longer the working man's food, it's now joined salmon and tuna and the like. Mullet's like kind of the last redoubt of the working man southerner, smoked mullet especially. And there's a great restaurant that I discovered while wandering about, a place called Chet's in Pensacola. Does anybody know this place? Woo! All right. Chet's. I went to dinner at Chet's, late lunch, early dinner, and I had mullet 7 different ways. If you think about these grand feasts in a grand restaurant, with a succession of courses, each a riff on the last. This is it. I had fried mullet fillets that had been marinated in milk and garlic overnight. I had bone-on fillets that were just rolled in cornmeal and a little bit of red pepper. I had mullet backbones that were, again, rolled in meal and fried, and they were fried so hard that you really could, some you could bite into, the other you sucked the sweetest meat, the meat closest to the bone, off, and they were great. I had mullet gizzards. No, they're good. They really are. I mean, think about, and they're like the size of a little pencil eraser, and they're the texture of like a firmer calamari. A little bit, yeah, a lot firmer calamari. But they're good. I had white roe and yellow roe of the mullet, one of which is a euphemism, both of which were good. It'll take you a second. And I found this place that, this place, Chet's, was about frugality. It was about getting the most you could out of a mullet. I don't think there's anything else to get out of a mullet than they get out of Chuck's. But I recognized that frugal streak, that frugal instinct of Southerners in a place like Chet's. And I saw the same thing driving through East Texas. I came upon this place near, just across the border from Arkansas, this place called Glow's. And she had cookies in her window. When I walked up, she had cookies on her window, and they were inscribed in, if I remember, they were like Ziploc bags, and each one of them had in marker WTS. And like any other food geek, I'm intrigued by something I don't know. I don't know what a WTS cookie is, so I asked, and she looked at me like I had three heads because I didn't know what a WTS cookie was. A WTS cookie is a walk-to-school cookie. Thus your treat for walking to school at lunchtime. And as I started digging into it, I found that name, which is basically just a simple sugar cookie, a butter and sugar cookie, that name is prevalent in that area. And it has become the school lunch system there serves WTS cookies to students. Has for, as best I can tell, 40 years. And it seems as though their school lunch program hasn't been given over to the guys in the green eye shades and the pimps for the agri-industrial complex. They cook real cookies. Wow, the agri-industrial complex went after me. Was that for the Bush comment or the agri-industrial comment? Or the Maurice Bessinger comment? Suffice to say, I've found a bigger South out there. And I want to read a couple of things from the book, some new things, to give you an idea of kind of how my head works now. It's a frightening prospect to introduce you to, but I'll try anyway. And also to touch on some of the stuff that Bill said in his kind introduction. I really think, I believe that the Southern Foodways Alliance does a fairly good job of this, and I do a lesser job of trying to help people see food as a cultural product, as a totem of who we are, and as kind of a totem of our better selves. I mean, I see food as a creation of black and white together, like music. There's not much. We've had a divisive and sometimes ugly history. And I think of food as one of those things we hold high and say, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is, not only sustenance, this is sacrament for us, for Southerners. I did a piece not long ago for Susan Puckett. Oh, no, Susan, it was for the Oxford American. I'm sorry. And one of the things I came upon when thinking about this idea of symbols and Southerners kind of reaching for symbols. The Confederate flag doesn't cut it, never did. But the sociologist John Shelton Reed, recently retired from the University of North Carolina and a really great friend, John once suggested that in light of that, with the knowledge that the Confederate flag doesn't work, never did, that perhaps you'd be better off if you built a flag, constructed a flag, knitted a flag, Betty Ross style. Betsy Ross, yeah, that's her name. If you made a flag for Southerners that had a pig on it, twirling on a spit, a happy pig kind of engulfed by smoke, that we all could rally around the pig, a pig over coals. And I think John was close, but I didn't think he quite got there because it leaves out a sizable population. It leaves out Jews and Muslims and some other folks. But I came upon something, I don't know, probably a year ago that I think might work. And it's at the Pig and Chick here in Atlanta. Have you ever seen their flag? The background is a checker, like a NASCAR checker, black and white checker. In the foreground is a happy, smiling pig. And I think there may be some flames, some kind of suggestion of smoke. If there aren't, I will it to be. And then next to the pig, kind of holding hands with the pig, is a chicken. And at one point, they tried to talk y'all's good governor into, when y'all were debating your flag question, tried to talk y'all's good governor into adopting that. He declined. But I think it could work. And in my experience driving around, meeting the folks behind these restaurants, eating this food, I always take something away from it, and it's more than just a full belly. I'm renewed in my faith in this region and the possibilities of this region when I sit down at these restaurants. So I'll quit rambling and begin reading just a few brief excerpts. And after I do that, we'll take some questions, and then we'll go eat. I'll read you something from the Florida chapter. And it's something that I adapted from a piece I did for the Oxford American, and it's on Ernie Michler. I thought his name was pronounced Michler until I went wandering around Florida again and was chastised. It's Michler. And y'all probably remember this book. White Trash Cooking was among the most unlikely bestsellers to ever climb the charts. It was published with a spiral binding in the manner of the South's beloved community cookbooks. The background for that cover image of a fleshy armed woman in a flower print halter was a patchwork of Tabasco sauce, Ritz crackers, and Velveeta cheese, bricolaged with those everyday icons, Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima, and Martha White, all of which was overlaid on a photostat of mulched turnip tops and precisely rectangular turnip roots. The sort of vegetable matter that does not come fresh from the farm, but straight from the can. On the inside cover, Jonathan Williams, the original publisher, declared, quote, "If you were trying to explain these recipes and snapshots and all to some grand maître like Paul Bocuse, you'd say, listen here, buddy. This be's the victuals of white southern rural peasants. Hit'll eat." Williams suggested that the reader imagine Bocuse and his ilk, quote, swooning over such delicacies as Big Reba's rainbow icebox cake, Tootie's fruited porkettes, and the cold collared sandwich as the Durkee's dressing drips onto their cravats. For those who did not dog-ear a copy, mixing up Goldie's yo-yo pudding and Mona Lisa Sapp's macaroni salad, baking resurrection cake, Grand Canyon cake, and Vicky's stickies. For those who have never had the pleasure of pondering recipes for canned corned beef sandwiches, potato chip sandwiches, and Girl Scout one-egg sandwiches. And for those who never knew, who once knew, but have since forgotten their glories, a Michler primer is appropriate. Ernest Matthew Michler, baby-faced with the unstudied good looks of a country boy come to town, was born in 1940 in Palm Valley, Florida, near St. Augustine. His father was a shrimper. His mother worked as a cook and a filling station attendant. Michler was fond of telling interviewers that his family lived without electricity until he was 17 or 18. And they lived in the middle of the swamp at an old catfish camp. He described the building as, quote, crude-cut cypress, the family privy as, quote, out of doors. Michler's father died when the boy was 6. Michler called him a mean SOB. He once called his mother, Edna Ray Michler, quote, the low-downest white trash that ever walked the face of the earth. But he aimed to flatter. Quote, Mama was a great fisherman, Michler said. Redfish, bass, trout, drum on the hook and on the line, mullet in the net, and she shrimp too, caught tubs of fish, unquote. By way of the book, Michler became a media celebrity, cooking chicken feet and rice with David Letterman and starting an on-stage trash can fire in the process. I went to the University of Florida, where his papers are collected, and spent a couple of days with them. You know, this is the food geek side of me. And I found the videotape, and the nice librarians hooked it up, and I got to just sit in the library at University of Florida, this beautiful special collections room, and watch Ernie Michler set David Letterman's trash can on fire. It was great. He became an arbiter of pop culture when Tammy Faye Baker, wife of fallen PTL founder Jim Baker, offered her Sloppy Joe recipes to PTL 900-line callers. Michler defended Tammy Faye's inclusion of canned chicken gumbo soup and her instructions that a cook will, quote, know if you had enough ketchup in it when it gets the right degree of redness. Michler told a reporter, I bet it's delicious, but I like my Sloppy Joes on cornbread, which is real low down. Soon, more than 200,000 copies of the book were in print. But trouble followed money. In December of 1986, in the wake of a People magazine article that referenced a $45,000 royalty payday, an attorney representing the Ledbetter family of Alexander City, Alabama, threatened suit over Michler's unauthorized use of their daughter's photograph on the book cover. The Ledbetters joined an unlikely cadre of people who, taking note of the book's success, threatened suit against Michler. The most curious complainant was the Junior League of Charleston, publishers of Charleston Receipts, the ultimate white glove Southern cookbook. The good ladies of Charleston claimed that 23 recipes in white trash cooking, including roasted possum and broiled squirrel, were lifted almost verbatim. Can you imagine what it took for those white glove ladies to say, that's my possum? You know? They saw money. They needed to fix up their house or something. I don't know what it was, but that's bold. Meanwhile, Michler went to work on his second book, Sinking Spells, Hot Flashes, Fits, and Cravens. The back cover shows Michler in his prime, tending a cast iron skillet roiling with grease. In the background at the sink is a man in briefs and a white T-shirt, his partner, Gary Jolly. By way of white trash cooking, Michler outed the South's white trash. With book 2, he outed himself. Quote, I casserole them to death, Michler said of Sinking Spells, the book he had written and collected in fits and starts, much of it while on book tour for white trash cooking. No matter what Michler might suggest, Sinking Spells was a more mature effort, one that utilized the recipes in folio form, but shifted the focus to food ceremonies, like dinner after a cemetery cleaning. Y'all have all been to those. The casserole luncheon of a quilting circle, and the wake of Michler's own mother. Sadly, quote, one side of a conversation between Gracie Dwiggers and Rosetta Bunch about Edna Ray's wake and funeral, told over the phone, that's the name of the story, was one of Michler's last efforts. Sinking Spells, Hot Flashes, Fits, and Cravens was published in November of 1988, and Michler died of AIDS soon after. But today, his books stand as testaments to the working class cooks of Florida and beyond. Now, one thing I don't mention in this essay that I think is one of the most fascinating, if you have that book at home, go back and look at it. The photographs folioed at the center, they really recall Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. They're very, very honest, very sympathetic portraits of people. And I really believe that book was, too, that Michler had something to say. He wasn't poking fun at his people. He was celebrating his people. And those photographs do a lot to convey that intent. And I admire that book. And I think it deserves another look. I'll read you something from Georgia, if I can find it. In recognition of all the great food we've got tonight, I thought I would celebrate one of the places I've discovered more recently in Atlanta, and I can't recall who first told me about it. It may have been Susan Puckett, it may have been Jim Alkmoody, it may have been Angie Mosier, whomever it was. They did me right. And that's Carver's Country Kitchen. Casseroles are maligned by righteous eaters. And this is a place here in Atlanta. And I've done my share of bad-mouthing. In a magazine article, I referred to cream of mushroom soup as the, quote, ubiquitous duct tape of culinary creation. And the laugh's good, but basically I was being snide, I believe my palate was somehow superior. Those were the dark days before I had the chance to eat at Carver's Grocery, a white brick hutch with wire-caged windows set on 18-wheel thrummed western fringes of downtown. Sharon and Robert Carver are the proprietors. Robert ran it as a true grocery from 1975 until 1990, when Sharon quit her real estate job to cook. She began serving fried chicken, fried catfish, and hot dogs in a cement-floored store. She added meatloaf and chicken and dumplings. But Sharon, who favors shamrock green meatloaf, shamrock green aprons. Shamrock green meatloaf would be bad, even on St. Patrick's Day. So she favors these aprons, and she swoops her hair, her gray hair, way up. She found her métier in the cooking of casseroles, dishes that claim a lineage back to ancient admixtures like Moroccan tangines and French cassoulet. The word casserole entered the English language in 1708, but the American iteration did not come to the fore until 1934, when Campbell's introduced a tin concentrate of cream of mushroom soup. Tuna noodle casserole soon followed. And in that wake came Sharon Carver's broccoli souffle, inspired by a 1960s-era cookbook from the Rocky Mountain, North Carolina Junior Women's Club. Quote, it's got mayonnaise, mushroom soup, cheddar, and eggs in it, says Sharon of the wedges of green velvet she dishes from a hot box at the back counter, alongside a trompe-l'oeil window box framed by flower print curtains. Quote, my sweet potato casserole has eggs, sugar, evaporated milk, butter, pumpkin spice mix, and brandy flavoring. It came from the same book. People love our hash brown casserole, too. That came from a little spiral-bound book done by the wives of real estate agents in Donaldsonville, Georgia. I got rutabagas. No one does them anymore. Robert got that recipe from a fellow he met in the grocery store, an old A&P, now run by a bunch of Korean families. I mashed them up with salt and pepper and sugar and butter. Ask Sharon the key to her success, and she doesn't flinch. My secret ingredients are cream of mushroom soup, sugar, and salt. You got to have that flavor. That's what gets you hooked. That's what gets everybody addicted to my food. I like her and I like her food. I also like the way that she cares about these community cookbooks. Those are great social documents, and I fear we're losing those as social documents. Remember how when you looked at community cookbooks in years past, they'd have the name of the cook there? And you could even look and trace family lineages by recipes over editions and the like. And now, what the heck happened? Most of the community cookbooks excise the names of the cooks. They've become so well produced, they look like, something that Mario Batali would be cranking out instead of, the midwives of Decatur. Sharon Carver wants those old recipe books, and so do I. I'll read one more piece, and this is another new discovery for me, this one from Texas. And then we'll have a chance to talk a little bit. This is in the town of San Leon, Texas, and it's a place called Gilhooly's. And I'll take a sip of water first, because this is a drinking place. If a team of new urbanists set out to design the perfect waterside joint according to the tenets of Gulf Coast vernacular architecture, they would be hard-pressed to find a more honest template than Gilhooly's, an end-of-the-road kind of place, perched on a tongue of land that thrusts into Galveston Bay. On the drive down from Houston, I pass ragtag RV parks, house trailers on stilts, a store called Junk and disorderly. I like that. You know, as a writer, sometimes you're given gifts, and that being one. You appreciate those gifts. And this gets a little more tawdry. A boat christened the Filthy Whore of San Leon. It's a rough place. A friend of mine, Rob Walsh, who writes well for the Houston Press, just down the road from San Leon, told me, and I could not confirm it, that in San Leon there are more convicted felons than in any other community in Texas. That once they leave Huntsville, they head for San Leon. Nowadays, fishermen, some commercial, others recreational, rule this randy spit. But in the early years of the 20th century, San Leon was sold as a planned community, a, quote, city of gorgeous flowers and beautiful shrubbery, a playground for untold thousands. One real estate prospectus promised cool, delightful breezes in summer and pledged that San Leon would soon rival Coney Island and Atlantic City. Another, and this one was key, heralded extra large and deliciously flavored oysters in almost unlimited quantities. Exceptional of the oysters, most of the pledges were wishful thinking at best, swindles at worst. Oysters still matter in San Leon. The best place to get a bead on how much they matter is Gilhooly's, owned and operated since 1987 by Phil Duke and always serving local bivalves, harvested by Croatian oysterman Michler Ivic. The place is ringed by a shell and dirt lot. There's an old boxcar at center. Inside are a U-shaped bar, low ceilings, and along one wall, an incongruous collection of African tribal masks. Old license plates cover the truss beams in the accustomed fashion. The menu borders on encyclopedic and features a San Leon BLT, which translates on the plate as a fried bologna sandwich. Inventive menu writing is not merely the province of restaurateurs with white toques. They also dish fried boudin balls, employing the preferred Texas spelling for the rice and oddment sausage known as boudin in Louisiana. So in Texas, they add an A before the I. And all around Texas and Louisiana, you see increasingly people frying their boudin, taking the stuffing out of the sausage, rolling it in flour or corn flour, and frying them. I order the meal hereabouts, oysters Gilhooly and a long neck. Back in the kitchen, they shuck a dozen, set them topless over a pecan and oak fuel fire, swab each with butter and Parmesan cheese, and cook until the shells shade towards black, the oyster lips curl, and the cheese burbles and spits. The kitchen is amazing. To walk back in that kitchen, I mean, there is like an oil drum cooker, like the kind you'd see somebody cooking on the side of the road, an oil drum cooker set into the line alongside. So here's this, there are two big stoves with big old burners going, and then they somehow wedged this oil drum cooker alongside, and they're stoking it with wood. It's a beautiful sight to behold, especially when the oysters are spitting on top. They arrive on a metal-lined platter that looks like it was recently liberated from a second-rate steakhouse. Do y'all remember those? That, like, if you went to Western Sizzlin', it'd have the little incisions so that the oil or I guess it would be juice would drain away. You will not taste, I have not tasted, a better roasted oyster. And yes, I've been to Drago's in suburban New Orleans. That's a little bit of food geek insertion. I mean, people that would challenge me on my knowledge of the field of roasted oysters. And now for the disclaimer, courtesy of longtime employee Desiree Mack. Quote, tell anybody who's thinking about coming that we don't allow children. This woman stopped me. I was finished with my meal. I'd eaten my oyster, I'd drank my beer, I'd paid my bill, and I said, I said, and by the way, ma'am, I may end up writing a little something about my experience here, and I was asking her some details on who owned the place, and she stopped me, and this is what she said. So, no children. None. Not even outside. I'll catch them before they set their playpen up in the courtyard. No kids, no dogs, no midgets, just like the sign says. Some of us have kids at home and we don't want them in here. Thanks, y'all. I'll take questions, entertain arguments, whatever y'all wish. It's a pleasure to have such a great and enthusiastic crowd. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In a previous book, you called attention to one of the best fried chicken places in Norville, a Korean fried chicken place, and it's now gone.
Yeah.
So the problem here of writing about something that disappears, the first question is, do you have another Korean fried chicken place?
I defer to Mr. Kessler or Christian.
No, but I would suggest Ecuadorian fried chicken. Crazy chicken on Culinary. That is delicious.
And you know, to this point, I've spoke about coming back to Atlanta. I mean, I've been subscribing to Christian's Knife and Fork for 20 years now. Huh? My father's been subscribing to it longer than that. But I mean, to me, you know, to the basic question is, you know, I think these places, as I write about them, I hope they offer, you know, kind of a vicarious pleasure even for the person that never gets to visit them. I'm as interested in the story as I am the food. And it's the nature of this kind of writing that places go out of business. You know, if I get you interested in Korean fried chicken and you go find the next place and you tell me about it, then we're all doing well. It really, though, I mean, I love to eat, and I had 2 lunches today. I got off the plane and grabbed a bite at Zabby Lee because I was starved down on Old National Highway, and then I had a second lunch at Watershed. I had beautiful fried okra, squash, tomatoes, creamed corn. Perfect lunch, perfect second lunch. So I don't know. I love to eat, but I'm also probably more compelled by the stories behind the food. So I'm sorry the Korean place is closed. Let's find another. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about Scott Peacock named the James Beard Best New Southern Chef, whatever that is?
I think James Beard got something right. I think it also signals it signals the dawning awareness of the restaurant-going public and the kind of the white tablecloth public that the foods of our forebears, elegantly prepared, simple but not simplistic foods like the peerless salmon croquettes they have there. You know, that food is worthy of a white tablecloth. That food is comparable to, or superior in this case, as judged by Beard, to the inventive fare, the hyper-inventive fare of a chef with a French pedigree. I think it's emblematic of America waking up to the importance and the value of vernacular foods, and I think it's great. Yes, ma'am.
I'll say something about Southern Foodways. I'm not familiar with that organization.
Sure. She asked me to mention the Southern Foodways Alliance. This is an organization based at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture in Oxford, Mississippi. I'm the director. We are 5 employees in total. Angie Mosier, who is here tonight, is our board vice president. And we document and celebrate the diverse food cultures of the American South. So we do oral history work. In a year, we'll probably interview 100 old-line cooks, artisans, farmers, and the like, documenting their lives for posterity, and also as a way to broadcast back to them and to the population at large that their lives are worthy. And we also make films. We make about 6 films a year that do the same things. The Oral Histories act as kind of finding aids for the films. Back in January, we did an event here in Atlanta, and we had a great crowd. Probably we thought we'd get 100 people, and probably 250 or 3 turned out. And tickets ended up on Craigslist, a secondary market. It was great. But we make these films in the same way, just a different way of telling those stories. And then we put on events beyond the one in Atlanta. We have an annual symposium in Oxford, Mississippi, each October. This year will be our 10th. With events upcoming in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Houston, Texas, all of which kind of mix and match high and low. A lot of our members here, especially in Atlanta, are white tablecloth chefs that appreciate the kind of oilcloth table cooking that undergirds the white tablecloth, and understand the communication between the two, that they need each other, that white tablecloth and oilcloth need each other. And we do events wherein that white tablecloth chef pays homage to the oilcloth table chef. So that's what we do, in short. We have a website, southernfoodways.com, if you'd like to take a look at the oral histories and the like. Yes, sir.
Let me phrase my question correctly. In your travels and in today's rapidly changing environment and the diminishing image of local customs and dialects and things like that, how do you find so-called Southern food establishments? Are they holding their own, or are they gradually disappearing into franchises and the same everywhere you go? You can always, every town you go to, you can find a Pizza Hut, things of this nature, but do you find the local cuisine holding on?
I do. The basic question was, in this day of kind of strip malls and the commodification of restaurants, do I think that Southern cuisine is holding on? And if those people that do hold on, how? Why? I think the 2 things to consider here. One is that, when we talk about Southern cooking, Southern culture, we're not talking about something that's static. I mean, a culture continues to evolve. And I think about that more here than anywhere. When I come to Atlanta and I see this vibrant, robust city with so many new immigrants coming into it. And Southern cookery and Southern culture, Southern cuisine will continue to evolve as new immigrants come into the city, as come into the region. So I think that is welcome, and that, think about Taqueria del Sol down the street. The turnip greens there, to me, are distinctly Southern. They show the influence of new Mexican immigration into the South. Eddie Hernandez, there's his take on our food, on turnip greens. And it's just as viable and just as vital as the turnip greens at Carver's. So that's what gives me hope. I also think that we as eaters are waking up to the importance of places like Carver's. And there is a new appreciation for those. And I think that, I'm 43, I think. No, I'm 43. And I think there's a generation now in their 20s that are far more hip to the importance of places like that than I ever was at that age. And they see, and you talked about this idea of, in essence, we're being sold a bill of goods by, people that are marketing, whether it's Pizza Hut or whomever. I think these kids in their 20s are far smarter consumers than I was at that age, and they can ferret it out, and they know real things, and they're looking for Carver's, and they'll sustain a place like Carver's going forward. As you can probably tell, I'm a hopeful guy, and that some of that may be a little too bright a view, but it's what keeps me going. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that restrictive laws on street food vendors and mobile food vendors are taking away a certain part of the culture?
I think restrictive laws on street food vendors is a horrible thing. I think it's based, well, I don't want to go too far. I'm against it. I think that a vital street food culture, is a path toward, assimilation into America. It was for the longest time, whether you were, a hot dog vendor out of Coney Island, or you were, a Polish guy selling knishes on the street, whatever it is, they were stepping stones to kind of the American dream. And I hate to see another round of crackdowns in vending. New Orleans, Jefferson Parish outside of New Orleans is the kind of flashpoint for this right now. But you also saw it in New York not that long ago too. So, I think it's certainly, when I talked earlier about food being a way to think about race and class, there it is. There it is, bold-faced right in front of you. Yes, sir.
You might say a word about the Hidden Kitchens program that the Kitchen Sisters did. I know that these things exist surreptitiously in a way.
Yeah, it's a great point. If y'all don't know, you should. The work by Davia Nelson and Nikki Silva, who style themselves the Kitchen Sisters and do pieces on National Public Radio, beautiful pieces of reportage. They also have a book out called Hidden Kitchens that examines this kind of underground food culture that exists, that thrives beyond the reach of the health department, beyond the reach of and beyond our eyes too. I mean, so many people moving into a new immigrant community are setting up house restaurants or are vendors on the move. And this book is a beautiful portrait. We were talking a moment ago about the Southern Foodways Alliance. They've become great friends of ours and will be coming to our symposium this year to tell some of those stories and share some of that. It's a great book, and if Frank, I don't know if Frank has it, I bet he has it, but could get it for you. Anybody else? Going once? Yes?
How do you find some of these out-of-the-way places that you find, like Speed's down in Sheldon's Bluff, which is way down in the woods?
Speed's is way down in the woods in Shellman's Bluff, and it's worth finding. It's a Georgia treasure. There's a informal fraternity of people that are obsessed with this kind of stuff, and I'm not speaking really of bulletin board postings on the web and stuff. I'm talking about, people who are fascinated with these places and share with one another. Whether it be in a professional capacity that, I'd talked to Christiane Lauterbach about some place and she says, I discovered this wonderful place when I was down at the beach. Or whether it's, I'm traveling to Durham, North Carolina, and I call up, a friend who I know would drive 100 miles out of the way for a great piece of fried chicken. I rely upon those kind of sources, and it's also important to keep track of what everybody else is writing. I'm not saying wow. Wow. So that was basically saying I'm a plagiarist, I think, is what the light's coming down. But I think right now there's a boom of interest in this kind of writing in these kinds of places, and there's a lot of good stuff being turned out. But you need some way of synthesizing it all, and that's kind of my job, I guess. And even more than that, it's hard to take suggestions from people. I take them all, and then I have to run them through my head with my own kind of internal calculus to determine what matters to me. If a place is just about great food, and it opened 3 years ago, it's not going to end up in Southern Belly. Places have got to have, the new needs to wear off before I'm going to cross the threshold. And that proves a little bit to the gentleman's point about, this place going out of business or that. I try to find places that are long-lived, that have some sustaining ability. And friends help with that, and, I try to filter as best I can. Yes, ma'am.
Serious
It's serious eats. Yeah. Christian's right. I mean, it's a great kind of look at the zeitgeist of the food world, especially driven by people in their 20s. And it's, I don't know who came up with this term, but these are food obsessives. And we didn't have this kind of deep and profound and sometimes kind of disturbing interest in food 10 years ago. I think it does great things for job security for those of us who write about it. But it also signals a maturity of the American market, of people realizing that food matters. It's more than just 3 squares a day. And that site's a great way of getting abreast of that. All right, going once, going twice. Almost sold. Yes, sir. I always duck this question. And I actually, I had an interview this afternoon in a conversation and was asked much the same question. And I came up with, I think, might be the best duck ever. And it is. All right, if I'm last meal, the way it was asked to me this afternoon was, okay, you're being executed tomorrow. And I thought, all right, I'm going to be executed. I didn't think about whether it was going to be lethal injection or what it would be. But I realized, I don't know. So here's my answer. All right. I want barbecue. And I don't care where the barbecue comes from, because they could be frying me in Texas. They could be frying me, in California. So that allows me to say, I want barbecue, and then I don't have to name the place, because we don't know where I'm being fried yet. So I just hope it's not like, New York State or Connecticut, because